Hi there and welcome to this week voiceover video. Today we are looking at the saya that I made for the petty knife from last week video. And this started out as an idea for a quick and simple project, but as it turns out it took me way longer than I expected, and I have to say it has been a little bit harder than I anticipated as well. But anyway, let's start to say something about this and I'll let you guys know later on why this took me so long. So to start off, I'm preparing the material for the saya. As you saw, I've used the same exact wood that I used for the knife. So these are olive wood burl, ebony and walnut. On a 2x72 belt grinder, I'm grinding flat surfaces everywhere I want to apply glue. So the next step, of course, is to use some epoxy resin to stack these pieces together. And I had many questions about why I didn't use the white spacers as I've done on the Tang. And the main reason is that I had no more. But also, even if I had that, I'm not sure if I would have used that, because the adhesion between wood is really great with just epoxy, but this is really thin material. I thought it could work like a failure point or failure line, so I think it's weaker than just the wood and the epoxy. But of course I haven't tested it, so not sure. Moving on, after the glue has time to dry, I am squaring up my block, so I used a combination of the metal cutting bandsaw and the 2x72 belt grinder. The next step is to split the blank in two, and to do that, of course, I use the bandsaw. And here I've done a little bit of a mistake because I split this part exactly in two, but later when you chisel the space for the blade, you're doing that all in one side, so the side that you want to make the pocket should be a little bit thicker, so the material is not offset on one side or the other. And really this is a problem here only because I had very little material to work with, so I was already very close to the final dimension on my blank. But of course, if you had a larger piece of wood to make the saya, wouldn't be a problem at all. So now off camera I've ground flat the two surfaces, and then I'm tracing the layout of the blade, at first with a pencil, and then I go in with a small blade like a kiridashi, and I stay on the inside of the line so that later when I'm about to hit the final dimension I can sneak up to the line little by little and make sure the fit will be decent. And after that comes the longest part, and really this part took me half a day and it was very tedious, very slow, and yeah, I wasn't expecting this at all. As you can see here, I'm using a combination of chisel. I had two flat chisel, two round one, and then I even had like a V1, but I ended up using pretty much all the time the flat one, and I'm not sure why. I know there are some specific chisel to make saya, like traditional Japanese chisel. I think it would be interesting in the future to make one and see how it performs. But for this time, just with a flat chisel, I think you can do pretty much everything. So of course I went little by little to make sure I was just right on the dimension, and I guess that's why it took me so long. I've also used some files and sandpaper at the end just to smooth everything out and make everything flat. The next step is to profile one side of the saya, and I'm doing it now because if I glue up before I cut the shape, I wouldn't know where to start and where to stop, so doing one side now seemed like a good idea. And so of course I did that with the metal cutting bandsaw and the belt grinder. After that I can glue back the two sides, being absolutely careful to not misalign the two parts, otherwise it would be obvious that this is not one solid piece. Then with the glue dried I can refine the shape, bandsaw and the belt grinder of course. And even here I went little by little and just taking my time to not screw up all the work I've done before at this point. And after a good amount of time I was satisfied with the shape, so moving up to the next step, I want to make the guard just like I made it on the knife. So I'm tracing the shape of the cavity, and to do that I've used the trick of the paper and the pencil. Then off camera I've cut out the pattern, and then I've used it just like a mask to apply some paint on the brass material for the guard. And just like I did for the guard of the knife, I'm starting on the drill press with a small series of holes, and then with a combination of needle files and also a Dremel off camera. Little by little I can make sure this groove is just like it should be, and then I can move on to adding some texture to this surface. Just like on the knife, I'm using a very small ball peen hammer, and I really like this texture, works very well for brass. Then to glue the guard on the saya, I'm using some super glue. Not sure if it's the best option here, but I thought this part was not really going to be subjected to any force or anything, so I think the super glue is plenty strong enough. And also another great advantage is that the super glue doesn't really squish out from the surfaces when you glue together. Otherwise I would have used again epoxy, but it's a lot messier and I was worried to fill the hole with epoxy. Yeah, that's why I've used super glue. We'll see if it holds up. Now the final little bit of shaping again on the 2x72 belt grinder. And then off camera I've also done decent amount of hand sanding up to like 400 or 600 grit sandpaper. After that, the last steps are to force some patina on the guard and then to apply some white mineral oil over the whole saya, and it's done. Unfortunately, as you can see here on the olive wood burl, it's really easy to see where the line is. So for me it breaks a bit the magic of the saya, like a single piece of wood, but other than that the other lines were pretty much invisible. So I was very happy with that. Just I think the highly figured olive wood is very easy to spot a line of inconsistency in the pattern. So next time I'll do one, I'll use other kinds of wood. And that's all. So it was a very fun project, but also very long. I'm not sure if I ever do another one, to be honest. Like for me it was very strange because the knife took me around 3.5 days to complete. And you know, at the end you have a pretty cool object and it's very rewarding. And for the saya it took me 3 days and at the end I had a wooden sheet. I don't know. It doesn't excite me as much as knives, but maybe it's just me, I don't know. But of course I think it was still an interesting process. And of course you always learn stuff along the way, so all good. Thank you a lot for watching and for listening the voiceover. And of course, thank you a lot for the great support on Patreon, and I really appreciate that a lot. As always, if you have questions or suggestions or anything, be sure to contact me and I'll reach you back as soon as possible. Thank you again, everyone. Have a nice day and see you next week. Bye bye.